Hey, it's Sela Social Studies.
Hey guys, and welcome back to Sealess Social Studies. So in this section of the chapter, we're going to discuss about what our founding fathers, those lead delegates who were brave enough to stand up against the British Empire, what they did in our country for the fight for freedom, for the fight for independence, and what they did when they gathered together as what we call the Continental Congress, and what type of decisions they made as an impromptu type government. So in response to the December 1773 Boston Tea Party, British Parliament attacked the colonies by passing the Coercive Acts. The 5 Coercive Acts, or the Intolerable Acts, were passed in early 1774. British Parliament felt that they could break apart the colonies and their unity by separating and punishing Massachusetts. Would the colonies fail? Would they fight back if Massachusetts got hurt and the colonies were like, oh my gosh, maybe that could be us too? Well, the fate of the colonies rested on the shoulder of some progressive thinking patriots. And in response to the Coercive Acts, colony delegates united for the First Continental Congress to make a decision on how to deal with British Parliament and King George III, and how to show the king that the colonies can assert their authority. Now, the First Continental Congress met in Philadelphia from September 5th to October 26, 1774. 12 of the 13 colonies sent delegates who were elected by the people, by colonial legislatures, or by the committees of correspondence of those respective colonies. Georgia was the only colony not to send delegates to Congress because after being chosen, they were divided on the future direction of the colonies. Now, the First Continental Congress consisted of some of the greatest groups of men during the late 1700s. Delegates included George Washington, Patrick Henry, Richard Lee, Edmund Pendleton, Benjamin Harrison, Richard Bland, and to lead them was Peyton Randolph. He was elected president of the convention. When the delegates met, they were not clear on exactly what they were going to do. However, with such a great representation of leadership, there would be a set of core tasks that were going to be completed. The delegates agreed that they should set out to inform the king of their complaints or their grievances that the colonies had under British rule. They also knew how important it would be that the delegation repeated these grievances to the rest of America and the world, fearing that the king would retaliate. Some of the grievances were, of course, the one and only taxation without representation, and how they wanted to move west past the Appalachian Mountains. They wanted to have that manifest destiny, that God's will or obvious fate, that we should move all the way to the Pacific. The colonies had always acted as independent units, so there were many arguments and debates early during the convention. The original plan of the convention was to write a letter to the king declaring the rights of the colonists and make their grievances or their complaints known to Britain. Delegates penned the Declaration of Rights to King George III to express authority of the colonies and explain their grievances to the king. The delegates told the colonists to repeal their laws. They also voted to continue boycotting British goods and placing an embargo on those British goods. And the last item to come out of the colonies was to raise a colonial militia, militias of Minutemen to help fight the British if the need arise. Now, Congress agreed to meet again later in the year if the king ignored their grievances. Some sources actually stated that the king did nothing about the letter, and they questioned if he even read it at all. This was very important. This was the first act of the colonists, the delegates, to say, hey, you can kind of still be our king, but you need to know what our rights are. You need to know what we think what we deserve, what our rights should be. So that's what that Declarations of Rights and Grievances was, to try to tell the king what he was doing wrong. Now, this Continental Congress, we're going to cover it again, but you will see that it continuously meets in order to make decisions for the colony, especially throughout the war. These groups of delegates meet to discuss what they can do for the future of our nation and what we can do about how we can deal with the king. All right, see you next time on CLS Social Studies.